My name is Adrian Kuzminski. I live in Fly Creek near Cooperstown in Otsego County. Can you hear me? Okay. And I'm the moderator of a group called Sustainable Otsego. And we've had a lot of activity in our area, as some of you may have heard. There's a handout that's being passed around, which includes the remarks I'm going to make here. And on the back of that handout, let me just briefly point out, there's a copy of another handout from the Independent Oil and Gas Association with a map of New York State, and it lists 9 counties that they are targeting for economic benefits for gas drilling. And I'm going to get back to this in a little bit, but this looks like a sort of a plan, and if there are going to be carve-outs in New York State, it might end up looking something like this. The road to a statewide ban begins at the town hall, in my opinion. Politics has to be relocalized. Town boards have to pass ban ordinances, or whatever it takes. But they will be persuaded to do so only if it can be demonstrated to them that this is what the majority of their voters want. And that's what's happened in the towns in Otsego County that are looking at this. And maybe we'll hear more about this later, but there have been, we were able to quantify, people were able to quantify that a majority of registered voters in those towns, by polls, by petitions, and other certifiable ways, that the majority of the voters wanted a ban. And then the town, didn't matter so much what their politics was, the town boards suddenly say, oh, you want a ban? Okay, let's see if we can do a ban. So that's what's going on. Of course, it's not quite that easy, but that's the general idea. So I'm arguing here that communities must be mobilized, not one by one, because we'll never get there. There are 1,600 towns, I think, in New York State, but many at once, and we're really running out of time. This means holding events, generating publicity, creating networks, reaching out, building coalitions with all kinds of people, and to some extent, I think, dampening some of our ideological convictions. It also means running people for local office, starting now. This is a local election year in all the towns across New York State. No one's mentioned running for local office yet, but I think that's absolutely essential and very, very important, and also a very difficult thing to do. But it's possible to cash in on this wave of concern about fracking. All these people that are coming to town meetings, signing petitions and so forth, they're also ready to vote for candidates that'll support those same things in the fall elections. So it's all about the grassroots, I think. It's all about relocalization, it's about home rule, it's about direct democracy, it's about resistance to outside forces. Whether we like it or not, I believe we will have to rely more and more on our neighbors and local networks as larger systems become more unreliable and more dangerous. This is not something we will make happen, I don't believe. It is something that will happen to us. The question is how we respond, whether we'll be the victims of this process or somehow be able to manage it as free agents on a local level. It's important, I think, to start with the problem, not with the solution. Activists, and this may not be a terribly popular thing to say here, but activists tend to be idealists, often pushing some kind of a controlling agenda. We want to get somewhere very specific in many cases. That turns a lot of people off, I've discovered. It's more important, I think, to arouse the public to the threat, which is very real. Once aroused, the public will by and large do the work. They'll figure out a lot of these things very quickly, perhaps in unforeseen ways. If they are not aroused, we lose. The immediate problem is bad public policy, as we know. Unsustainable practices like fracking, which threaten not only our towns, but in fact, as we now know, the planet itself. To resist these policies is to reclaim ownership and control over our own communities, to protect our property values and our resources. It becomes a war against economic growth and unacceptable, unaccountable concentrations of wealth and power. Now, the federal government, as we know it, is corrupt, dysfunctional, and bankrupt. All you have to do is watch the cable news to see that, right? Ditto for New York State. Both are increasingly, I believe, irrelevant when not threatening to our welfare. They could not regulate the industry, even if it could be regulated, which it cannot. But what they can do, and what they seem to be about to do, is to allow it to go forward anyway. At the same time, we've got a ban bill in Albany. The dysfunctionality of the state is itself a good argument for a ban. It's one of the best, I think. I don't see how Tony Avella's ban bill, or even Englebright's 5-year moratorium, gets passed unless state legislators feel the earth shaking under their feet. Now, without knowing Walter Hang's secret handshake in Albany, I've been trying to, get him to teach me the handshake for a while. And, I don't know whether it's the nanu nanu or whatever, but anyway. Without the secret handshake in Albany, maybe somebody here knows the handshake. We have to rely on having a bunch of towns pass local ordinances to get that earthquake going in Albany. Otherwise, we don't get anything in Albany. And as somebody said earlier, this comes down to a statewide ban comes down to legislation in Albany. And in the end, I think, especially after last Monday's lobby day that I and others attended, it's not about Cuomo, it's not about the Democrats, it's about the Republican leadership in the state Senate. Especially it's Dean Skelos, George Margias, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Tom Libous, and also a couple of other key Democrats, John Bonacek and our own Jim Seward. So I think just to amplify, take a minute more or so, just to amplify some of the things that Mary Jo was saying, I think we do have we believe, our attorneys tell us, we've got some very good attorneys, Michelle Kennedy and Doug Zamulis in our area, tell us that we do have the authority. It's not like we're trying to get home rule. It's not like we're trying to establish rights. We have them. We just have to use them. Towns can ban fracking. That's what we're all about. So I think it's an important point to make that it can be done. It's not something we already have this right. We're not trying to get it. Just a point about the regulation thing. I think regulators, people that want to regulate can be allies, as was said. They can also be obstructionists. They could be, there's a thin line between enabling the industry and regulating the industry. The de facto ban that we've had for 3 years or so now has in fact made possible this huge wave of resistance, and that came from the regulatory people in a way. So I guess I think pushing on all fronts is very important. There are lots of ideas out there. I don't think it's a matter of choosing so much between them as it is a matter of really just getting people motivated. And there's nothing like having some soccer moms seeing some thumper trucks down the road from their house, which is what happened in Middlefield, New York, to really get people upset. Seismic testing, they saw the drilling was actually not some theoretical thing that was going to happen someday, but it was happening that morning outside their house. At least the preliminary, and the preliminary actions towards it, and that really got people going. So I'll stop.
Thank you.
Oh, can I add one more thing?
Quickly.
If we don't get a statewide ban, that's why I had this map on the back here. If we don't get a statewide ban, and if we do have some success with local ordinances, there are going to be carve-outs in New York State. There are going to be some areas that are going to be protected for a variety of reasons, and the other areas that are not. And if you notice on this map, the areas that have been exhibited the most resistance to gas banning on the local level so far, which would be Sullivan County, Otsego County, Tompkins County, and also the watershed areas of the city, are explicitly not included in this map that the gas industry has put out. So, go ahead.
And one point that I have made continually in New York City is that if New York City politicians protect the New York City source of water in the Catskill-Delaware watershed, they will not protect it, because at the very least of the underground migration of toxic plumes. And also there's the air pollution that can go, depending on the substances measured, up to 200 miles approximately. One thing that we've seen in stark detail in the last few weeks is an old understanding that people don't get mobilized until they feel their backs are against the wall. And look what happened in Wisconsin. And it quickly spread to Ohio and Indiana, and I don't know where, there may be some other places where there were sympathy demonstrations. But things have gotten to the point where enough people are being mobilized because they understand that things are that bad. I just want to make a few comments, throw a few names out in terms of this legislation that we all want. I mentioned earlier that there was a ban bill that we drafted, and it went to several interested politicians last April and May. Those were mostly downstate Democrats. But there was Linda Rosenthal. Brian Kavanaugh was very interested in the ban. Velmanette Montgomery, a state senator from Fort Greene in Brooklyn, came out in January of 2010 in a letter to her constituents supporting a statewide ban. And Barbara Lifton has been very vocal on this issue, but she's also being very careful, as so many of them are. Tony Avella, as everybody I guess knows, some days ago came out with his own version of a ban bill, and I have a copy here if anybody wants to look at it. It's very simple, 2 sides of 1 page, and it's very straightforward. He wants to prohibit hydrofracking and hydrofracking fluids, in other words, including vertical wells. So that was a nice little distinction that he made. But he was alone. He didn't have any co-sponsors yet. But as he told 2 of us 2 days ago when we met with him in his Queens office, because he took that initiative, other people who said, oh, you'll never get that passed, what do you think you're going to do? All of a sudden saying, oh, well, I'll sign on. He took the initiative, he took leadership, and there's a positive response. A week and a half ago, a couple of us met with Danny O'Donnell, an assembly person from Upper West Side of New York City. And he happens to be Rosie O'Donnell's brother, and he's a very good guy. And when we came in to talk about this, he said, look, don't try to convince me about a ban. I've been there. Let's talk detail. And we also talked about the water withdrawal bill that Rachel talked about, and that there was a relationship between withdrawing water and the fracking, and he hadn't realized that. By the way, Tony Avella didn't either. He thought, well, all the environmental organizations are for it, so I signed on. We said, well, there are some serious objections. Here, have a look. Oh, yeah, thank you. And he seemed really straight, and I believe that he'll probably read it and think about it. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that despite my long jaded view of virtually all politicians, there are some decent people who can be persuaded. And the one thing that will persuade them is a mass popular movement. And I know this has been said in some other ways, and I just want to underline it again. And in fact, Avella said it 2 days ago, and I've heard other politicians say it. Make us do it. Even Obama, bless his heart, has said the same thing. And there's a wonderful story about A. Philip Randolph that was brought to the White House by Eleanor Roosevelt to meet her husband. And they talked about things, and he said what he wanted to do, and Roosevelt told him, I agree with everything you say. You have to make me do it. That's us. That's the mass movement. So let me end there, and if we have any time for Q&A, do we, Joan? About 3 minutes. So does anybody want to say anything or ask anything? Yes, please.
Hi, I just want to follow up on what Adrian said about voting, running for town boards. The other part of that puzzle is that second homeowners in New York State can vote and should vote where it counts, and that's usually where we live. So I would encourage people to go to, we set up a little website called votewhereitcounts.org, or you can go to the Catskill Citizens website, and the same documents are there. People should register in your neighborhoods. Where we are in Sullivan County, 24% of our of our population, of our residents, are weekenders or second homeowners. Some of them are just summer people, and it's totally possible and legal for them to vote and register to vote, and they should vote. These elections are won by a handful of votes.
Yeah, they have to register, though. They have to,
yeah, they have to
They may have to
register.
change their registration from...
That's what she's
We're
saying.
going door to door, handing out
Right.
registration cards, having them fill it out. We're mailing them in. We're encouraging absentee ballot. You know, you check the box, get your absentee ballot, and I just
Good.
think it's really important.
Thank you. Dave.
I wanted to ask you a question. Can the state be compelled to take other things into the public trust, like airspace?
The courts have expanded the public trust doctrine to include wildlife. I think actually gas in itself could be argued to be within the public trust doctrine. So many forms of natural resources and air. Yes, that would be a natural analogy. And the forests are protected state parks.
Wouldn't that give us more ammunition in the takings argument? Now that, you know, if we could say that even the air that they're going to pollute is part of the public trust?
So I think that bringing private lawsuits, asserting public trust rights to a number of resources is an excellent idea. You know, we may find judges who are willing to establish good precedents. So it's a good strategy. You know, you have to research the precedents, how they will apply, but expanding the use of the public trust doctrine is an excellent idea, and that was promoted in the 70s by Joseph Sachs, who initiated a lot of good legal activism, and so that's definitely a good theory to explore and develop.
One question I had was, aside from the drilling itself, there's actually quite a few other things that would be cause for concern, like the seismic testing and the pipelines that are coming through. I was wondering, is it a good idea, do you think, to try to get a moratorium, like a one-year moratorium in your town, just so that your towns actually have time to pass legislations such as a ban?
Well,
we're
running out of time. There isn't a whole lot of time left in this struggle. I think the DEC is going to come down with something fairly soon, and you know, in a few months they may be giving out permits. So, you know, my inclination would be to push as hard and as far as you can. If you can get your town to, you know, if they're upset about this already, have them look at the idea of a ban. But on the other hand, do the best you can. And if you think a moratorium is what could be useful, towns vary a lot, and this is pretty much an on-the-ground decision, I would say.